Most Harry Potter fan theories sound clever until you check the books and realize they fall apart quicker than Professor Snape when he hears the name Lily. But a small number did the opposite. They sounded ridiculous at first, were argued about for years, and then quietly turned out to be completely true. Like the fact that Hogwarts is free to attend. Hogwarts does not charge tuition. Magical education in Britain is fully funded by the Ministry of Magic, which quietly removes the most obvious logistical question in the entire series. How thousands of families afford 7 years at a castle with moving staircases and a dragon problem. This was later confirmed by J.K. Rowling outside the books. Students still pay for supplies like wands, robes, books, and cauldrons, but the school itself costs nothing to attend. This explains how Muggle-born students with no wizarding wealth can enter the system without the entire setup collapsing immediately. It also reframes inequality in the wizarding world. Education is not the barrier. Everything else is. Now, why they even need money in a society where you can just magic things out of thin air is another question altogether. Wizards naturally live much longer than Muggles. Witches and wizards have a significantly extended natural lifespan, commonly exceeding a century, and capable of reaching around 200 years. This was confirmed by Rowling, and reframes how old age works in the series. Dumbledore, who appears ancient, dies at roughly 150 years old, meaning he was not nearing the end of his natural life at all. He was murdered early. This also makes Voldemort's obsession with immortality look even more self-defeating. Had he avoided soul-splitting, murder, and cursed artifacts, he could have lived for many more decades without doing anything at all. Instead, he chose the most dangerous method possible to extend a life that was already unusually long. If I didn't know any better, I'd think Rowling just randomly makes up new facts about the wizarding world without considering previously established lore. Dudley's Dementor attack forces self-recognition. Dementors do not simply induce fear. They force victims to relive their worst moments and confront their inner selves. Rowling later clarified that Dudley Dursley did not relive trauma in the traditional sense because he had lived a protected, indulgent life. Instead, the Dementor forced him to see himself exactly as he was: cruel, selfish, and hollow. For someone whose identity was built entirely on being indulged and admired, this was psychologically devastating. This moment explains Dudley's subtle behavioral shift later in the story, including his awkward concern for Harry before leaving Privet Drive. It wasn't character growth. This is J.K. Rowling, after all. It was the magic ghosts that made Dudley act like a human for once in his life. Hermione smelled Ron in Amortentia. Amortentia is described as the most powerful love potion in existence, identifiable by its pearlescent sheen and the fact that it smells different to every person, reflecting what attracts them most. In Half-Blood Prince, Hermione smells freshly cut grass and new parchment, then stops short before naming the third scent. This omission led to years of speculation, until Rowling later confirmed that the final smell was Ron Weasley. The reason it is left unstated in the text is not subtle mystery, but narrative damage control. Revealing it explicitly would have undercut the slow burn tension of their relationship arc. In other words, the silence is doing structural work, not hiding a twist. Now we just need someone to make a disheveled ginger-scented candle. Magic is genetic, but not inherited cleanly. Magical ability is tied to genetics, but not in a neat or predictable way. Rowling confirmed that there is a magical gene, which explains why magic often runs in families. However, the gene can appear spontaneously in Muggleborns and fail to manifest in Squibs, meaning inheritance is inconsistent at best. This neatly dismantles the ideology of blood purity without requiring the story to shout about it. Pure blood supremacy is not just morally wrong, it is scientifically incorrect within the rules of the world. Magic does not care about surnames, family trees, or who thinks they are superior. It occasionally skips generations, appears without warning, and ignores every rule bigots wish it followed. And here I thought a wizard's magic was measured by how many midichlorians they have. Voldemort used Quirrell as a temporary Horcrux. While Voldemort is widely known to have created 7 Horcruxes, later canon clarified that Professor Quirrell functioned as a temporary living vessel for a fragment of Voldemort's soul. This was not a formal Horcrux in the traditional sense, but the effect was similar. Voldemort's presence slowly corrupted Quirrell from the inside, while the squidgy little face on the back of Quirrell's head corrupted him from the outside, physically weakening him and accelerating his death. This explains Quirrell's rapid deterioration, and why Voldemort abandons him without hesitation once he becomes useless. It also establishes two key rules that become important later. 1. Housing a soul fragment inside a living person is unstable, destructive, and ultimately fatal. And 2. A small CGI face on the back of someone's head looks stupid. Wizards can fly without brooms. Flight is not inherently tied to broomsticks. Rowling later clarified that all witches and wizards possess the latent ability to fly, but almost all of them require a broom to channel and stabilize it. It's kind of like how Jedi can fight without lightsabers, but they use laser swords because they look freaking cool as hell. Brooms function like magical training wheels. Voldemort's ability to fly unaided in Deathly Hallows is not a new spell or dark invention. It is an advanced expression of raw magical control. This reframes broom-based flight as a cultural standard rather than a hard limitation. They are simply not skilled enough, disciplined enough, or reckless enough to try. King's Cross was a real magical limbo. After being struck by Voldemort's killing curse in the Forbidden Forest, Harry awakens in a bright, empty version of King's Cross Station. Dumbledore explains that the experience is happening inside Harry's mind, then immediately undercuts that explanation by asking why that would mean it is not real. Canon supports both interpretations simultaneously. This space functions as a genuine liminal state where souls, knowledge, and choices exist outside normal life and death. The broken, suffering creature Harry sees beneath the bench is confirmed to be the mutilated fragment of Voldemort's soul that had been living inside him, and not a creepy-looking Voldemort-shaped fetus, as most fans speculated. The location is not symbolic set dressing. It is a functioning in-between space, where the Horcrux is destroyed, and Harry is given a genuine choice to move on or return. Basilisk venom made Horcrux destruction possible. The encounter in the Chamber of Secrets quietly establishes the most important mechanical rule of the entire series. Basilisk venom is one of the few substances capable of permanently destroying a Horcrux. The other substance is, of course, good old Coca-Cola. Have you ever seen how fast it strips rust from metal? It's gnarly. When Harry kills the Basilisk and stabs Tom Riddle's diary with the sword of Gryffindor, the sword absorbs the venom, turning it into a reusable Horcrux-destroying weapon. This single event enables the destruction of multiple Horcruxes later, including Slytherin's locket. Ron and Hermione even return to the chamber to retrieve Basilisk fangs specifically for this purpose. The Basilisk does not destroy the Horcrux inside Harry, but it provides the only reliable method by which Horcruxes can be destroyed at all. Neville Longbottom could have been the chosen one. The prophecy describing the child who would have the power to defeat Lord Voldemort applies equally to Harry Potter and Neville Longbottom. Both were born at the end of July. Both had parents who defied Voldemort 3 times. Both lost their parents as a direct result of Voldemort's actions. What ultimately determined who became the chosen one was not fate, destiny, or prophecy mechanics, but Voldemort's own decision. That and Harry's name just sounds better in a book title. Would you want to read Neville Longbottom and the Goblet of Fire? Yeah, me neither. By choosing to attack Harry instead of Neville, Voldemort marked Harry as his equal and set the entire chain of events in motion. Neville's later actions reinforce this reading rather than undermine it. He leads resistance at Hogwarts, stands up to Voldemort publicly, and destroys Nagini, the final Horcrux. The prophecy did not crown a hero. Voldemort did. Harry and Voldemort are distantly related. Harry Potter and Voldemort share ancestry through the Peverell brothers, making them distant relatives. Harry descends from Ignotus Peverell, whose invisibility cloak passed down through the Potter family. Voldemort descends from Cadmus Peverell, through the Gaunt line, inheriting the Resurrection Stone disguised as a ring. This connection is explained directly by Dumbledore and is supported by grave inscriptions and family records. While the relationship is distant enough to have no emotional or social relevance, no
Harry, I am your father
here, it adds structural symmetry to the story. Both characters inherit legacies tied to the Deathly Hallows. One seeks to dominate death, the other learns how to accept it. Same bloodline, opposite conclusions. Harry becomes the true master of death. Uniting all 3 Deathly Hallows does not make Harry immortal, and the books are explicit about that. What it does make him is the philosophical master of death. Harry possesses the invisibility cloak, uses the Resurrection Stone, and becomes master of the Elder Wand without seeking it. More importantly, he willingly walks toward death with full knowledge of the outcome. Dumbledore explains that mastery of death does not mean avoiding it forever, but accepting it without fear. Harry survives not because he outwits death, but because he's the main character. Because he doesn't try to escape it. He can still die naturally, He just no longer panics about it, which in the wizarding world apparently counts as enlightenment. Trelawney was actually a genuine seer. Professor Trelawney's reputation as a fraud comes from her day-to-day behavior, not from her actual prophetic record. In canon, she delivers 2 full prophecies, and both come true exactly as stated. The first is the prophecy concerning the child with the power to vanquish the Dark Lord, overheard by Snape and passed on to Voldemort. The second occurs during Harry's divination exam, when she predicts that Voldemort will rise again, with the aid of his servant, which happens later that same night, when Pettigrew escapes and restores him. Outside of these trance states, her predictions are vague, melodramatic, and mostly useless. The pattern is consistent. When Trelawney is conscious, she guesses. When she's not, she is terrifyingly accurate. The joke is not that she's a fake. It is that she has no control over when she is real. Okay, say it with me. If I had a nickel for every time Trelawney had a prophecy come true, I'd have 2 nickels. Which isn't a lot, but it's weird that it happened twice. Snape was functionally one of the story's true heroes. Severus Snape's actions drive the survival of nearly every major character, including Harry. After Lily Potter's death, Snape becomes Dumbledore's spy, feeding Voldemort false information while secretly protecting Harry for years. He intervenes repeatedly to save Harry's life, manages the impossible task of maintaining credibility on both sides of the war, and ultimately agrees to kill Dumbledore to preserve the larger plan. Oh, sure, Snape kills his boss and he's a hero. But when I talk about murdering my boss, I have to spend 2 hours begging HR to let me keep my job. Make it make sense. Snape's final act is giving Harry the memories that explain how Voldemort can be defeated. Canon does not present Snape as morally pure. Rowling explicitly describes him as gray. He is bitter, cruel, and emotionally stunted. He is also essential. Remove Snape from the timeline and Voldemort wins, quickly and without drama. Dumbledore functioned as the personification of death. Dumbledore's role mirrors death from the tale of the 3 brothers with uncomfortable precision. He possesses the Elder Wand, briefly owns the Resurrection Stone, and safeguards the invisibility cloak before passing it on. More importantly, he never attempts to evade death once his mistakes catch up to him. When Harry dies in the Forbidden Forest, it is Dumbledore who greets him in the liminal King's Cross space, not as a judge or a ruler, but as a calm guide. Death, in the fairy tale, waits patiently for the 3rd brother and greets him like an old friend. Rowling never formally labeled Dumbledore as Death, but she's also never contradicted my personal fan theory that Harry is a cannibal, so do with that what you will. The Death Eaters were deliberately modeled on Nazi ideology. The Death Eaters' obsession with blood purity is not a vague metaphor or accidental parallel. Rowling later confirmed that the wizarding world's hierarchy of purebloods, half-bloods, and muggleborns was intentionally designed to mirror real-world racial ideologies, particularly Nazism. Voldemort's rhetoric, symbolism, and methods align closely with historical fascist movements. Obsession with lineage, scapegoating of minorities, rewriting history to justify dominance, and the belief that power equates to moral superiority. That and his little square mustache really give him away. Crucially, the ideology is internally hollow. Many so-called pureblood families are heavily interrelated due to limited numbers, and Voldemort himself is a half-blood. The system is not just evil, it is logically broken, which is the point. Dumbledore was always written as gay. Albus Dumbledore's sexuality is never stated directly in the books, but Rowling later confirmed that he was gay and that his romantic feelings for Gellert Grindelwald played a major role in his early moral failures. This context reframes Dumbledore's guilt, restraint, and long-term self-punishment. His reluctance to seek power, his refusal of political office, and his insistence on keeping emotional distance all stem from a youthful relationship that went catastrophically wrong. The confrontation does not change the plot mechanics, but it explains the emotional logic behind his decisions. Dumbledore is not just wise. He is someone who learned, painfully, what happens when brilliance is mixed with desire and no restraint. The trio symbolically mirrors the Deathly Hallows. Harry, Ron, and Hermione align symbolically with the 3 Deathly Hallows in a way that maps cleanly onto their personalities and roles. Harry corresponds to the invisibility cloak because he values protection, humility, survival over dominance, and he's shaped like a triangle. Ron aligns with the Elder Wand, struggling most with insecurity, status, the temptation of power, and he's shaped like a straight line. And lastly, Hermione mirrors the Resurrection Stone, acting as the keeper of memory, knowledge, and the past, constantly pulling forward what has already been lost or forgotten. And she is Of course, shaped like a circle. This is not stated in canon, where the three are largely described as people-shaped, but the parallels are consistent and deliberate enough to function as structural symbolism. You know, reading this back, maybe I shouldn't write these things after I've taken my nightly melatonin gummies. Look, the point is, the Hallows are not just objects. They are temptations, and each member of the trio represents a different way of responding to them. Harry did not name a child after Remus Lupin on purpose. In the epilogue, Harry names his children after figures who mattered deeply to him. Yet, Remus Lupin is notably absent. This omission sparked immediate speculation, given Lupin's role as a mentor and surrogate family figure. Rowling later confirmed the reasoning. Harry deliberately avoided using Remus's name because he believed Teddy Lupin, Remus's son, should have the option to carry his father's name forward himself. This reframes the absence as an act of restraint rather than forgetfulness. Harry is not honoring the dead indiscriminately. He is consciously leaving space for the living, which is a rare moment of emotional maturity in a series otherwise fueled by grief-driven naming decisions. Plus, after 3 kids, Ginny made Harry get a vasectomy, vas deferens snipicus, so he couldn't name another kid Remus even if he wanted to. Hogwarts is one of many wizarding schools worldwide. For most of the series, Hogwarts appears to function as the center of the magical universe, largely because the entire 7-book Harry Potter saga takes place there. Fans theorized early on that this could not possibly be the only major wizarding school, and they were correct. Rowling later confirmed the existence of 11 major magical schools around the world, including Beauxbatons, Durmstrang, Ilvermorny, and others spread across multiple continents, like Australia's Spells and Smells, the only wizard school that focuses solely on scent-based magic. Okay, you caught me. I made that one up. The existence of other wizarding schools reframes Hogwarts as prestigious, rather than unique. The wizarding world is larger, more decentralized, and more culturally varied than the books initially suggest. Hogwarts just happens to be where the paperwork nightmare is set. War trauma never truly healed for the survivors. The end of the war does not reset the wizarding world to a cheerful post-credits scene. Rowling confirmed that many survivors of the Battle of Hogwarts carried lifelong psychological scars. Fear, grief, and loss did not fade simply because Voldemort was gone. This explains why so many characters later name their children after fallen friends. Well, that and after 1,084,170 words across 7 books, J.K. Rowling was too tired to come up with brand new names. It also explains why the post-war wizarding world feels quieter, rather than triumphant. The victory is real, but it is expensive. The series does not end with healing. It ends with survival, which is a far more realistic outcome for anyone who has lived through a war. Neville's parents will never recover. Frank and Alice Longbottom were tortured into insanity by Bellatrix Lestrange using the Cruciatus Curse, and the damage is permanent. Rowling later confirmed that there is no spell, treatment, or magical intervention capable of restoring their minds. Unlike physical injuries, this kind of magical trauma cannot be undone. They remain alive, cared for at St. Mungo's Hospital, but mentally unreachable for the rest of their lives. This matters because it establishes a hard limit on magic. The wizarding world can regrow bones overnight, but it cannot fix everything. Thank God Neville grew up to be hot, so at least his life wasn't a complete crap fest. Ron and Harry never graduated Hogwarts. The boy who lived is technically the boy who dropped out. Both Harry Potter and his BGF, best ginger forever, never completed their final year at Hogwarts and never formally graduated. This was later confirmed by J.K. Rowling. After leaving school to hunt Horcruxes, neither of them returned once the war ended. Hermione Granger did go back and finished her education, because of course she did. Ron and Harry, on the other hand, moved straight into careers at the Ministry of Magic without formal qualifications. This works only because the post-war ministry made exceptions for people who had, in technical terms, saved the entire wizarding world. The important clarification here is that Hogwarts graduation is not a hard legal requirement for employment. It is a standard path, not an unbreakable rule. Paperwork matters, unless you defeat Voldemort, in which case the system suddenly becomes very flexible. Voldemort could have lived for centuries without Horcruxes. Given the confirmed wizarding lifespan, Voldemort's fear of death becomes deeply ironic. Wizards can naturally live for well over a century, sometimes approaching 200 years. Voldemort dies at around 71 years old, meaning he shortened his own life dramatically through violence, instability, and reckless soul magic. Hey, you know what they say, live fast, die young, and leave a noseless corpse. If he had avoided Horcruxes, avoided constant physical destruction, and avoided declaring war on the world every few years, he could have lived far longer than he did. His immortality project did not extend his life. It destabilized it. In attempting to conquer death, Voldemort ensured that his life would be shorter, uglier, and far more fragile than it ever needed to be. To quote Alanis Morissette, "Isn't it ironic?" George Weasley was permanently changed by Fred's death. Fred and George Weasley are written as a matched set for the entire series, often treated narratively as a single unit split across two bodies, because everything J.K. Rowling knows about twins comes from those creepy girls in The Shining. Their dialogue overlaps, their inventions are collaborative, and even their identities are blurred to the point that other characters regularly confuse them. When Fred is killed during the Battle of Hogwarts, the story does not frame it as the loss of one twin. It frames it as the destruction of a system. Rowling later confirmed that George is never truly the same after Fred's death. He continues running Weasley's Wizard Wheezes, but the tone of his life shifts permanently. This is not a temporary grieving period. It is a lifelong alteration. A popular fan theory claims George can no longer cast a Patronus, because Patronuses require strong, happy memories, and the loss of Fred removed George's emotional foundation. While Rowling never confirmed the Patronus-specific detail, she did confirm the underlying premise. George carries the damage forever. The joke shop survives, but the jokes themselves do not recover in the same way, mainly because Fred was in charge of the setups, leaving George to spend the rest of his life uttering punchlines that make no sense out of context. This distinction matters. The wizarding world can repair bodies, regrow bones, and erase curses, but it cannot restore a person whose identity was built around someone who no longer exists. George does not lose his magic. He loses his other half, and the series treats that as a wound magic cannot fix. When you line these theories up, a single pattern emerges. Most of the biggest twists in Harry Potter aren't about magic at all. They're about lineage, who you're related to, what you inherit, and which old decisions come back around through bloodlines rather than spells. Once you start tracing those connections properly, the wizarding world stops feeling vast and starts feeling very small. That's where this goes next. All family trees in Harry Potter explained.